August 11th, Rutherford County School Board work session. Leading the pledge tonight will be Mr. Terry Hodge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Hodge. Yes, we may have an echo in here. Okay. Moment of silence, Ms. Michaels will do on Thursday. Okay. Agenda. Any questions, discussion?
After the work session tonight, the report on the House Education Subcommittee summer review, it will not need to be there on Thursday. So after we cover it tonight, we'll let that slip off.
Okay. And I think I talked to Mr. Hodge and yourself prior to the meeting, and the ELN and FRN, there's really nothing to report at this time. So we'll skip over this part tonight also. Okay. Again, any questions or discussion regarding the agenda? Okay. On the approval of the consent, the consent agenda, Mr. Estes suggested that we move the volunteer coaches under section, is that 12, Ms. Michaels, where we're taking that up? Yeah, the non-faculty volunteers. So Ms. Michaels will move all those names to section 12 for Thursday night. We'll discuss tonight, but vote, of course, on Thursday nights. Anything regarding the consent agenda, discussion or questions? And of course, we'll always enjoy getting to do the recognition, Mr. Odom.
Miss Gilligan will be here with us Thursday night. To be the only teacher appointed by the governor in the state, I think. So that's a really, really high honor. They actually, a week or two or so before that, flew her to Washington for another committee or something like that. She's gotten a lot of attention at the state level with her ability, really, to teach reading and train teachers how to teach reading. So she's, her husband's Mark Gilligan, principal at Cedar Grove, of course, but that's a real family of educators there, both of them very strong.
And getting started right away.
Right.
We're awfully blessed with a lot of talent here in Rutherford County, so that's always nice to know. Mr. Odom, I guess number 8.
Number 8 is facilities. This is John Coleman's elementary school bid. Rutherford County Schools Engineering and Construction Department received bids from R.G. Anderson Company, Robert S. Biscayne, and Sane Construction Company for the construction of the new John Coleman Elementary School. R.G. Anderson was the apparent lowest and best bidder, coming in at $17,239,000, plus there's an add alternative for the gymnasium LED lighting of $9,000, an add alternate 2C exterior LED lighting $8,700, and a deduct alternate number 3 resinous flooring for $10,000 for a total of $17,246,700. The Rutherford County Board of Education is currently waiting on approval for the final building and grading plan by the Army Corps of Engineers to begin construction. And the motion will be to approve R.G. Anderson Company as lowest best bidder for construction of John Coleman Elementary School at a cost of $17,246,700, contingent upon approval of construction by the Army Corps of Engineers. And that's part of that floodplain thing, approval. We've received some approval from some others. Mr. Carter, you want to kind of tell them what you've already received some information on?
We currently have verbal approval from the office in Nashville, and that is Mr. Terry Church up there. Also, we have permission and a letter from the town manager, Mr. Gill of Smyrna, giving us approval to do whatever we need to do in the area of the park there to do some grading to compensate Phil if we need to, or to put a detention or retention pond down in that area. So I think there's 2 more steps that's got to go through on up the chain of command to get final approval, and I don't know how long that's going to take, but as soon as we get that, we will move in there and start construction. It could mean that the building may not be finished. It may be Thanksgiving, or it could be Christmas, just depending on what time. But we're in pretty good shape up there that we have our children housed and have them in school at this time. Also, on another note, Roy Waldron will be coming in at 2 o'clock on Thursday. So since we don't have another meeting scheduled, I would like permission from Mr. Odom. I haven't discussed this one. I hope I don't, to put that on Thursday and bring it before the board to get a vote if I can get the figure reconciled that afternoon, 2 o'clock after the bid. So,
I see head shaking, so I think you're just fine on that, Mr. Clark. I know dealing with the Corps is probably a real labor of love, so you can just, I think Mr. Reed has been involved in that too, so, you know, just continue to do your due diligence. I know the families and the faculty and administration are very excited about the new construction there at John Comer.
I was just going to say that sometimes there's a little bit of confusion between FEMA and the Corps. And FEMA, usually you have to work with them on the floodplain in that area. And they're much easier to deal with because they have these issues arise all the time. And then, of course, the Corps, the reason they're involved with that area is because of the lake out there. And they're responsible for the lake and the property around the lake. So that's the difference in the 2 entities. And also, we got Rocky Fork closed. And the plans went out today on that for the clearing and grubbing. Once we get the clearing and grubbing opened up and approved and get that completed, we will do a topographic survey. There's so much stuff on there now you can't even get in there to get the survey done. Then we will do the bid package on that, and the money's already been approved for the site work for the elementary and middle grading, so we'll try to get that and get that done this winter. So next spring, maybe we can get the money approved through the county to start with the school building and get that going for the next year.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Clardy. Number 9.
Number 9 is under financial matters. The first one is the school activity funds, accounts payable and receivable. Each year, the school board must approve the accounts payable and receivable for each of the school activity funds that had outstanding accounts payable, $3,539.14, or accounts receivable, $8,036.90 at the end of the fiscal year. These are all routine school business transactions that relate to the 2014-15 school year. They could not be closed out by June 30th, 2015 because additional documentation was needed before a bill was paid or the school was waiting on a payment. Recommend approval. The motion to approve the 2014-15, the accounts payable in the amount of $3,539.14 and accounts receivable in the amount of $8,036.90 for various school activity funds as presented.
Questions?
That is totally routine. If it's not closed totally by the 30th of June, comes back every year, and that's not much for the 46 schools we have.
B.
B is approval of Read 180 System 44 Intervention Solutions for Smyrna High School, Smyrna Middle School, and Laverne Middle School. The Curriculum and Instruction Department is seeking the approval of purchasing Scholastic's Reading Intervention Program, Read 180 System 44, for use in Tier 3 classes at Smyrna High School, Smyrna Middle School, and Laverne Middle School. Read 180 System 44 is a research-based reading program that is designed not only to serve below proficient students, but also one that is designed to stretch the same students in order to accelerate them in the areas of reading, writing, and critical thinking. The design proposal will provide teacher and student instructional materials, licenses for the blended online learning component, provide teachers with product training, and provide in-classroom coaching by an implementation specialist to assure success in delivering the instruction to provide maximum gains for these students. Recommend approval. Motion to approve the purchase of Read 180 System 44 products and training for Smyrna High School, Smyrna Middle School, Laverne Middle School. The total cost is $162,982.36. We've used Read 180 in several other schools already. It's been around for a while and it's very effective.
So it's tried and true.
It is. It's research based. It's one of those that has passed a lot of scrutiny.
Questions? C.
C is the Technology Department purchase. The Technology Department is seeking approval to move from purchasing individual licenses for Microsoft Operating System and Microsoft Office to purchasing Microsoft Volume licensing through Microsoft's Enrollment for Education Solutions. The pricing is based off of a full-time faculty staff equivalency and will ensure that all Rutherford County Schools' computers, faculty, and students will have the latest updates in software. The price is $217,854 and was included in our technology budget for 2015-2016. Recommend approval of a motion to move from purchasing individual licenses for Microsoft operating systems and Microsoft Office to purchasing Microsoft Volume licensing through Microsoft's Enrollment for Education Solutions. You may want Mr. Zago to speak to this because of the amount of money, but Microsoft is changing where they, instead of licensing each computer, this is more of a blanket license where you can place it in. They're also going to allow teachers and other employees to use Microsoft Office and things at no charge for as long as while they're working for us. So really is a benefit to employees too. So all that, of course, Microsoft changed Office. You used to could buy Office and get the disk, and now it's those yearly subscriptions and that sort of thing. That whole thing is changing in the way they do that. So actually the per unit cost is much less this way than if you had to buy individual license, but it's up to you if you'd like to hear from it.
Go ahead, Mr. Zago.
A couple of the issues that are there that we're dealing with is compliance too. Microsoft's pretty hard on non-compliant customers or people that have copies of their software on computers that it hadn't been purchased. And we found, when we're doing some inventories that occasionally someone has brought something in, and we try to keep a very tight rein on that. And this automatically makes us compliant because it issues 7 copies of Office, like Mr. Odom said, 6 copies to a teacher. So for example, if Richard Zago is teaching 4th grade at David Erie, he has 6 copies that are assigned to his name. I can put it on any computers at my home or in the school as well. It also, one of the biggest things it does is, and then we hadn't talked much about, is it makes us compliant with having the latest Microsoft operating system, which is very expensive. It's much more expensive than the Office itself. So if Mr. Solomon is looking to upgrade a computer instead of buying another $400 or $500 Microsoft Windows 8 or a Windows 10 version, this automatically gives us a license for all of our computers in our system, no matter if they're in a classroom, in a lab, or any place that they are. They could be a laptop on bus as well. So it makes us compliant with any of those things. When we went to the Microsoft 365, it kind of puts us on Microsoft's radar too. so that we're doing some of those other things. We want to make sure we're compliant first and foremost so that Jeff doesn't have to spend unnecessary money paying fines. And also I want us to have computers that are operating on that latest version, because when we have a 7th, 8th, 9th grader working on our computers, they're still 8 or 10 years out before they become on the workforce. So what we're teaching them on is 8 or 10 years older than what they'll be working on. And we have computers out there that are still operating on some Windows 98 and things like that are 25 years older than what they'll be using. So we probably are not doing the best service for our students if we're putting them on something like that. This gives us the opportunity to do that at this cost for all technology in the system.
It's kind of savvy for Microsoft too, because if they've got teachers and students using their product, when that kid goes out sometime later and looks for an equipment or something like that, then that's probably, it kind of helps with it.
Questions? Number 10.
Number 10 is the textbook adoption committees. The instruction department recommends the following amendments to local math textbook adoption committees: TCA 49-6-2207, C 1 through 4, D, E, and F. All members appointed on each committee has completed a record of names and qualification form. As required by state policy, for this form remains in the office of the local director of school for 6 years of adoption. It is a documentation that the board approves the textbook selecting committee and that all are qualified to serve. Recommend approval of the motion to approve the list of amended members of the record of names and qualifications of members of local textbook selecting committees K5, 6-8, and 9-12 as presented. Remember, you approved the list last year because we didn't have standards in place. We rolled forward a year. Some teachers retired, some parents had their name removed. So basically what we have done is replaced all of those changes with the new names. And some of you board members gave us possible names as parents and all to serve on it also.
Questions? Eleven.
11 is revised policies. We have policy 5.801, Director of Schools Recruitment and Selection. Purpose of this revision is state law requires a majority vote of all members of the board. Policy 4.700, Testing Programs. Purpose of this revision is the new state law allows districts to opt out of including TCAP scores in the final grades if the district does not receive the score at least 5 instruction days before the end of the school year. Policy 6.4001, Student Surveys, Analysis, and Evaluations. Purpose of this revision, a new state law requires districts to adopt a policy prohibiting the collection of student biometric data involving the analysis of facial expressions, EEG, brainwave patterns, skin conductance, galvanic skin response, heart rate variability, pulse, blood volume, posture, and eye tracking without parent consent. Policy 5.117, Procedure for Granting Tenure. Purpose of the revision, a new state law requires teachers to be given notice of non-renewal within 5 business days following the last instructional day rather than by June the 15th. Policy 5.201, Separation Practices for non-tenured teachers. Purpose of this revision is a new state law that requires teachers to be given notice of non-renewal within 5 business days following the last instructional day rather than by June 15th. Policy 6.205, Student Assignment. Purpose of this revision is a new state law requires a principal to separate an alleged victim of child sexual abuse from an alleged perpetrator if the abuse allegedly occurred while the child was under the supervision and care of the school. Additionally, the parent or guardian may request the child be moved to a different school. Policy 6.405 is medicines. Purpose of this revision, a new state law allows students with pancreatic insufficiency or cystic fibrosis to self-manage their medications. Policy 2.800, expenditure of funds. The purpose of this revision, federal guidelines for the use of federal funds require the district to adopt a policy for implementing federal grant expenditure procedures. Policy 2.805 is the purpose of this revision is federal guidelines for the use of federal funds require districts to maintain conflict of interest standards governing the actions of its employees engaged in the selection, award, and administration of contract. Policy 6.200 attendance. The purpose of this revision is to allow an exception for absences for college visits and exam exemptions for determining eligibility for perfect attendance. Policy point 6201, the compulsory attendance ages. Purpose for this revision, state law requires students entering kindergarten to be no less than 5 years of age on or before August 15th. Policy 6.503 is homeless students. The purpose of this revision, state law requires students entering kindergarten to be no less than 5 years of age on or before August 15th. Policy 5.304 is long-term leaves of absence. Purpose of this revision is to delete maternity leave and adoption leave as categories for extended leave of absence, subject to a maximum of 2 consecutive years. Policy 4.401, textbooks, to include specific requirements for members of the district's textbook adoption committee. Policy 4.605, graduation requirements. Purpose of this revision, a new state law requires districts to use the State Board of Education's minimum requirements for graduation for students in grades 11 or 12 who are enrolling or transferring and are in the care of the Department of Children's Services. Policy 4.100, instructional goals. Purpose of this revision is to add the development of good citizenship to the list of instructional goals. First one is recommend approval, a motion to waive the second reading, second meeting limitation to allow the board to take immediate actions on the policies presented. And recommend approval of the motion to approve policies 5.801, 4.700, 6.4001, 5.117, 5.201, 6.205, 6.405, 2.800, 2.805, 6.200, 6.201, 6.503, 5.304, 4.401, 4.605, and 4.100 as recommended by the Policy Committee. I sounded like one of those people on the have the 30-second commercials. It gets speeds up at the end. You have to get it all in.
I would need a drink of water after all that, Mr. Odom. So, of course, we're all involved in the policy committee, and any questions or discussion regarding any of the policies? I like the prohibition of facial expression analysis. I may have gotten a paddling or two for that when I was in school. I think we're at number 12.
Number 12 is your discussion of non-faculty volunteer coaches and administrative procedure. And that's one we'll have the non-faculty volunteer coaches. Mr. Tackett is here, and we have worked on an ADM and all for that. You may want to hear him.
Mr. Tackett, if you would come up to the podium, we would welcome, and great to see you. I like your blue.
Let me say this. When I started this position, approximately November the 1st, 2 years ago, I couldn't quite figure out why the people in HR were so excited to see me. They just danced. And now, after after your approval of what's on the agenda for Thursday night, if that in fact occurs, that the number this year will be at 210 non-faculty volunteers already approved for this school year. But I think the purpose of the policy is the few, we hope few, that might not have been approved properly. So that's kind of where we got to. But I thought I'd share those numbers with you. I will ask Mr. Holliday, since he's the guy that probably know the answer to this question, which area do you think we have the most non-faculty volunteers?
I would suggest perhaps the bands.
That would be correct, sir. 65 already approved at band, and next is 30 for football. So you can see, when we talk about non-faculty volunteers, I think it's one of the parts that sometimes our athletic directors miss, the fact that there is a section, a large section, and that's just band, get into music and choir and so forth. I'd say a good third of the non-faculty volunteers we have are not athletic people. You've got chess, you've got robotics, all kinds of things that sometimes get approved for non-faculty volunteers. So I think that's a part of that we'll try to stress more carefully as we possibly can. And I know it's stressed. I sat in faculty, in principals meetings 10 years ago and heard it being stressed then. So anyway, that's my little bit, Mr. Odom. I didn't mean to go too far with that, but I'm here to answer any questions or make any conclusions that I can.
We now have pretty much a drop dead date that,
Well, here's the thing. We've obviously always had that drop dead date. I'm not sure where the ball gets dropped along the process, but somewhere it's just, I think it's been some part of a little bit of a practice as opposed to paying attention to the deal that people have skirted this, and because some do skirt it, other people skirt it, and sometimes it's intentional, I think. I think oftentimes it's very much unintentional that that's the case. I think the issue is that we had to deal with, Mr. Odom specifically had to deal with, was, where the punishment, for lack of a better term, needs to come down when somebody is out of compliance. And my position continues to be, it's really not the non-faculty volunteer that's the issue. It's got to be our people that are in charge. And I think that some very strong statements from Mr. Odom have brought that to some light, and hopefully we will be in far better compliance with it. But I think we've got to do as good a job as we can the next high school principals meeting, for example, and middle school principals meeting, making sure they're very much aware of where the buck will have to stop on those drop dead dates. But the drop dead date is clear. It's always been there. You cannot participate until you have approval of the school board. It's not turning in the app. It's not anything like that. It's got to be approval. And none of us would be the kind of people that would put things off to the last minute and need somebody tomorrow. But a lot of folks out there do. I mean, I had a phone call today. Someone wanted to see if they couldn't get fingerprinted today and get on tonight's agenda for something. And I said, well, that's not at all possible. But that is some of the thinking. And Ms. Barnes and I were talking before. And I know she stated it for years, and I've tried to say it as best I can as well. You need to allow at least 3 to 4 weeks before you're going to need non-faculty volunteers. Sometimes it happens much quicker than that. Sometimes it lasts longer than that, because part of that has to be when the school board happens to meet. But we're doing the best we can to pound the drums and say what we can. But I do think that, unfortunately, that there's going to have to be an example or two made that folks may not follow, that they recognize. But I think maybe we've gone a long way toward that in what's taking place this week.
Mr. Hodge.
I guess the question I would have with, you're talking about the drop dead dates and all that, what do you actually, you have an actual physical date, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons I brought up the point about band and music. You get into those kind of things, you never have a drop dead date. I mean, it's kind of easy to look and say football, the drop dead date could be July the 31st or July the 15th. For basketball, it could be October something. I mean, I think we kind of get those seasons that those do. But when you get into things like chess club, I don't know how we go about setting a deadline as to when chess club applications have to be in, or when band or choir or those kind of things. Or you got an accompanist that was approved for a choir, and then that accompanist takes a job someplace else, and in November they need another one. And if we put the drop dead date at August the 1st for that, then that leaves them out. So I don't know how we can put dates specifically on there to make that happen any more than what's already in place.
I guess where I'm coming from on this, I know we had this problem back 2 or 3 years ago. And from the board standpoint, we basically stipulated that any spring sports would be approved in the fall. And any fall sports would be approved this spring. Now, I understand newcomers coming in and all that, but the last thing I want to see is
Sure.
We did enough of that, and I appreciate, what you and Mr. Oldham have both done on this thing over the last couple of weeks, and I think with, people that skirt the system, as you put it, Mr. Oldham, I think he's got the authority to discipline the powers to be, so, which I like that aspect of it. And, I do hope, we follow through on it. The other thing I'd like to see, and I don't know if it's, I've heard bits and pieces, when you have these meetings with these athletic directors, that you just make it mandatory, just like we do, just like Mr. Sandy does with the finance people and all that. When he calls a meeting, they got the booster club in there.
To kind of clarify, I did hold a in-service, and I called it Athletic AD 101. And the design there as an in-service, and it was stated this way for first and second year, or aimed at first and second year ADs or someone who feels like they need more knowledge of it. It was an in-service. We do have 2 athletic director meetings every year that is required to be there, and we've had 100% attendance at all those. So that's never been a problem. What we didn't have attendance at the AD 101 was some newer ADs or some folks that don't have as much competence as I think they probably, I believe they could have benefited, but it was not a mandatory meeting that they missed. So make sure I clear that up, that no one has missed a mandatory, because when we have those, they do attend, and they're typically 2 to 3 hours long. We try to cover lots of things. The thing that I guess has been most disappointing to me is that I now, and began this in January, I send out a newsletter monthly of topics that I think are, with a calendar and so forth, of things that I think are very topical. And oftentimes when I get a question from an AD or even a parent or someone else, I'll cut and paste it, and I'll do a lot of Q&A at the end of that thing, of things, because if Terry Hodge is asking that question, Jim Estes might have liked to have the answer to it too. And this very statement of, we use July the 4th as a drop dead date as far as 14, 15 non-faculty volunteers being finished, and anybody working after the TSSAA dead period. After that, it has to be approved by 15, 16. That was in the May, June, and July newsletter that went out to all athletic directors and all principals. So the idea that the word is not out is a little foreign to me. And I did have one, and I certainly am not going to state who that would be, but I did have one about a week ago that asked the question, how did I miss all that? And I don't know the answer to how you miss all that. And it's that same group of people sometimes. As I sit in principals meetings, I found my mind wandering, but I would fuss when my faculty at a faculty meeting let their mind wander, and that same group of people that let their mind wander in a faculty meeting were fussing about their children, letting their mind wander. So sometimes we all forget what it's like to be on the other side of the thing, but hopefully, little by little by little, this information will seep in all the nooks and crannies. But I thought one of our principals made a very good point, and I think that it is something that I don't think it takes your action, but you certainly can comment on it. The point that anytime we do have a new athletic director, that person would be required to come in and do a 2 to 3 hour training session before they would take on those responsibilities. And I think that is a good idea, that they would be required to come in and do that, almost that AD 101 concept that I happen to have, to just go through the forms one by one. Because when you do have a group of 15 to 16 to 18 to 20, it becomes difficult sometimes to go through those forms or to think about them, because you know that you got 90% of them that got it, and the 10% that don't, you hope to catch on. And this way we might have a little bit better assurance that they are aware of what's taking place.
Mr. Holliday, did you have a question?
I had 2 questions. One of them pertains to number 9 on the administrative rules. If the applicant is to be supplemented by Rutherford County Board of Education, applicant must contact the system athletic director to complete the payroll packet. Just as a point of clarification, this is it appropriate to say always booster club funds that are flowing through the central office?
It could be school account, it can be booster club. There's 2 different ways they can be paid. They can be paid through those kinds of accounts or they can be paid the county supplement, which is a whole different set of circumstances as well.
If it's our employee, it has to come through this requirement, state requirements for that.
But our employee, the fact that they're not faculty, then they fall under this. So if we have I always get classified, certified, I have to pause and think, classified employee who is helping as a coach, are they a non-faculty volunteer?
Classified employees are ineligible to participate.
Because the 40-hour wage limit.
All right, I guess I'm confused then. Who could be an employee that would get, I guess I'm getting around to, who gets taxpayer dollars for coaching?
Percentage of the bachelor's in bond, that is taxpayer bond.
Okay,
The other,
the other supplements in language that the State Department of Audit and all use, they treat them as taxpayer dollars because it comes into the school's accounts. But they are not paid for out of the general purpose school fund. Maybe too much information, but so a lot of the people that you will see on the supplement list, each agenda, are board employees, but they are not covered by a BSN-5 supplement. Or they are getting additional money like for field work during the summer for a football coach. That does not tie to that BSN-5. There are a lot of possibilities.
I don't think any of those fall under non-faculty volunteers. If you are first a non-faculty volunteer, then you're not a Rutherford County employee, right?
Right, correct.
Right.
Okay, and so if you are getting money through our payroll system, that money is not originating from the general purpose fund, general purpose school fund. It is originating from a booster club who pays it into, we account for it in
The
this-
school activity funds
or
from the
school
sport.
And that would be like gate receipts and such as that. Okay. That's the only thing that I'm trying to designate between. When we say that Rutherford County Board of Education payroll, that in my mind suggests taxpayer dollars, general purpose school fund, and I want to make sure that non-faculty volunteer coaches, if they are getting any income, it's coming through gate receipts or booster fundraising. All right.
Yeah. It may, conceivably, it could flow through payroll. We will set them up as like 1 or 2 time pay a year hourly employees, just to run it through payroll.
And maybe to be more clear, it is legal, TSSAA allows it, our policy allows it. If it happens in middle schools a lot, where you have a coach that actually is a non-faculty volunteer that is getting paid the county stipend, county supplement, that money is there. And non-faculty volunteers do that, and they have to go through the full classified payroll package, just like someone else would have to do.
So we do have non-faculty volunteer coaches that are getting the board-approved stipend.
Correct.
Just because we didn't have anybody who, there was a faculty member who would coach the baseball team at the middle school.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Well, that's good to know.
Well, they're not volunteers.
Well, I think, again, I think
that's
that may
the
be a
problem.
term that we need to revisit
Yeah.
as well. Non-faculty volunteers suggest that no one gets paid. Well, that's not true. I think we probably should
Okay.
maybe change that wording a little bit to take some confusion away, because I'm going to guess, just off the top of my head, at least half of the people listed there are getting paid something. There would be less than 50% that would be a true volunteer, not doing it for some type of pay.
Well, again, I would like to echo Mr. Hodges' sentiments. Grateful to Mr. Odom and yourself for getting this thing squared away. It seems to continue to pop up and being in violation of board policy, TSSAA rules, and not having the potential of people being on the field with these students and not having had background checks. And so thank you for shoring that up.
Well, one thing that I strive to do is send out these lists on a continuous basis and stress the importance of making sure that name is on the list, because once in a while, it is possible that somebody should have been there, they weren't approved, and we go back and we find that kind of thing. But I think the real checkpoint needs to be for our principals and athletic directors is they need to look at the board minutes or what I send out, and if that name's not there on Monday or Friday morning or on Monday, they should call me. Why was Jeff Jordan not there? I turned him in. He should be approved. Why was he not approved on this past Thursday night's meeting? And I can go back and find it and say he wasn't approved because I don't have the form. Check never came in, or it should have been, and I made a mistake. Y'all were nice enough the last time to correct one of my errors that we actually did have last board meeting where a couple of people should have been approved and had not gotten through the right filter. So I think that we do our job as best we can here, but at the same time, we have to make sure that the responsibility is on those ADs and principals to look at the list and make sure the name is there. And you can't assume that the name is there. You've got to see it in black and white, and if it's not there, call me and we'll figure out why it's not there and see what we can do to get it taken care of. And if it's an issue on our part, then we'll fix it as quickly as we can.
I want to make something else clear too, because this came up all too recently. If a volunteer is approved for 1 year, they must come back again and again and again. Isn't that correct? Every year? And I don't know how many times they were told that, once or a dozen. I don't know, but I'm quite certain that a lot of them do not know that.
Let me give you an example that of a phone call I got today is a coach that turned this person in the spring, and his full intent was for that approval to be for the 15-16 school year. He came to me in April. It was not marked for 15-16. It was 14-15. It was approved for last year, which meant on July the 4th, he's no longer legal. I mean, I think there was pureness of heart in this whole situation that this person, this coach, felt like I wanted him approved for this year, but it was not marked that way, so therefore, now, I can go grab the form, grab the folder, see he was approved for last year, get the form and sign it, and it's good to go. So it's that quick to take place. But yes, the answer is they do have to be, by board policy, by TSSAA policy, they do have to be reapproved. And I think make a point, band and archery don't fall under TSSAA guidelines. But we have taken the position here with the school office that we will follow the TSSAA guidelines for all of our activities. And so just because band is not a TSSAA activity, we still follow those same guidelines of having them reapproved yearly on an annual basis.
We also had a problem with the coach who called me a couple of weeks ago and said so-and-so was not on the list, whatever. And he said, well, we don't have to worry about that because he didn't do anything. And I said, well, was he there, you know? And that question was asked by other people up here too, not just me. And yes, he was there. Well, now, if he was there, okay, I'm going to assume that person is coaching. Now, if he's sitting up in the stands, I mean, I help MTSU basketball coaches all the time, but I do it from my seat. They don't appear to be paying any attention whatsoever to anything I say, and I'm coaching them. I do a really good job from row 12. But if I'm on that field, that's another thing again, whether I say anything or not. And I think they need to understand that, too. I'm going to assume, I don't know what everybody else is going to assume, but I'm going to assume that they are coaching if they're down there.
I stress to principals, we really do not want them on the field till we have the background check, till we have all of this approved, because if they give advice, that's coaching, if that's their expertise. So bottom line is, don't put them on the field at all until all of this is clear. I mean, you don't have to worry about little definitions one way or the other, what constitutes coaching or not.
I need a little clarification on this too, particularly since I haven't been here all that long. But I know we're coming up on basketball now, so middle school football starts tonight, and basketball, I guess, is the 1st of November. And we've already approved some basketball people. I think there's some on this list. I looked it over today. I think there's some there. But if and I'm kind of going back to what Mr. Hodge said, the drop dead date, in a way, I would kind of like that idea. We just say it's October 15th. And what do we do if somebody comes in, hasn't done any coaching at all in basketball, but they come in December and they want to coach basketball as a volunteer at Stewart's Creek Middle School? Can we approve them at that point from then on? So we really, you see what I'm saying?
I do.
And I'm not so
You've
sure
got
that I'd
people
like
on
to
the
do
ninth
that.
list that are football. I mean, it's very clear.
Right,
Someone's being approved for football tonight, it's a little past the game.
exactly.
A volleyball coach, same situation, and we've got that, and you'll have that same thing happen possibly in December. Like I say, the real issue comes, and you just got to take it event by event by event, I think, because music and band and choir and drama, robotics, chess, I don't know how you put dates on those things. I do see how you can put dates on your athletics. I do see that.
Their season is essentially the school year.
Their season is the school year.
Yeah, I see that. So,
To me, you're going to make it awfully complicated if you go in there and start putting in these dates that they have to be approved by such and such, because you'll have to be, to me, very specific about these sports, but these do not. And I just as soon, from my standpoint, leave it alone and not put those dates on there. But I do what I'm told, so I'll be more than glad to make that happen if that's what we need to do.
Mr. Estes?
I go back to what they were saying about the date. The complaints I've heard, and you've answered this kind of, is nobody knew what the date was. Or some of them didn't know, let's put it that way. If we set a drop dead date on football, baseball, basketball, track, we can always approve somebody, I'm sure, if they come to our athletic director and say, we've got another person that's interested, we can still bring it, he can still bring it to the board and get them approved for the rest of the year. Of course, there's nothing we can do about chess and all that, because we don't know. But I would like to see a date set for every sport that we could, and if they get caught coaching after that, then I'm sure Mr. Odom knows the penalty, you know, so whatever the.
I mean, we can do that. I mean, what we want to do is probably communicate with athletic directors and kind of talk about a time, but we just take each of the, especially TSSAA sports, and try to put a date out there when we want it. What I've been telling them, for one thing, we got to have it a month before you want that person to help you coach, because your board meeting, some months you have only one board meeting. And it may be 3 weeks away, and they have to have background checks. We have to get all of that done. So you can't, it's not one of those things you can wait till the week before, or you can wait 2 or 3 days before it and get it done. It's not going to happen. The pieces are not in place. So it's got to be at least a month before you want that person on the field or in the gym or wherever you're going to have them. You know, it just got to be.
I guess that'd all come back to a little planning, wouldn't it?
Well,
Mr. Hodge?
That's exactly what I was gonna say. I think once you lay it out, I mean, everybody's gonna plan for it, like anything else, with a date.
we can do that.
It'd be easier on you. You give them a date to have this stuff in, and you wouldn't have them all.
Would it be your opinion then, Mr. Hodge, and I'm not arguing with you, but would it be your opinion if the basketball date was October 15, let's say, and we approved 26 people up to that date to help in this level, this school, that school, whatever, and then somebody came in later that we would not consider them? I don't think that's what you mean, is it? Or is it?
Basketball coach, or, boys, girls, or softball, or whatever. I think before that season starts, they know who's gonna help them coach. Right, I could understand if they lost a coach, let's say a volunteer got transferred or something like that, and that was the only one they had helping them, I would say, yeah, but let's bring it back to the board. But I think with planning, they know who's gonna help them, just like football. I mean, football cranks up, they got a good idea who's gonna be out there. And, it seems to me, it just makes your job a whole lot easier. I mean, not to try to make your job easier, but,
Please.
I don't see nothing difficult about it.
How about we leave this, Mr. Odom, and Mr. Tackett, to work out the specifics, and we'll revisit this again. But we're adamant as a board that anybody that's on the playing field has gone through the background checks and our approval. That is mandatory.
And as we've been talking about this, and I sent out the email, which you received a copy of, and the seriousness of this doing, we received some other inquiries. So here's kind of our interpretation of those. Well, I'm going to have somebody to come and talk to them 1 day, 2 days. We treat that very similar to like you would have a visitor to your classroom. If they're under the supervision of the coach or the teacher or the principal like that, they're for 2-3 days or something. You know, you might have that in band or music. Somebody would come in and play an instrument or talk to the kids about it. That we're not talking about them going through this process. I mean, they're guests. They're there for that. Is that okay with everybody in that? We're looking at those that are going to be there for multiple times over a protracted period. You know, we're not talking about guests or visitors that are invited in.
I think Mr. Hodges convinced me. I believe having a date is better than not having one. And I think Mr. Tackett, and particularly with the AD coming after your name, which people pay attention, coaches pay attention. If you write them a letter and you say no, and maybe we're guilty of being too nice too. By the way, I think maybe we have been. We're about to be Thursday night. Nice and understanding and sympathetic. That's what we're going to do. Which is all those are good qualities. But if we say, okay, football coaches, just to pick them out of the hat here, July 15th, anybody that you want helping you, that's the date. If you don't have them approved on that day, they had better not be out there on that field at any time, or there's going to be a problem and you are going to pay. I think they'll pay attention to that. But I know we got a lot of sports, and I understand we got some that doesn't apply to. But I think once you get that established, like Mr. Hodge said, or we get it established, and they learn that they better do it, and it may take an example somewhere down the line too. I know that, but you know, I think they'll comply with it. I don't know.
Okay, I think we're clear.
Your decision to make on how we follow through anything beyond what we've got, but we'll keep it posted. And if it'd be helpful to you, I don't mind at all when I send out the email that sends out tomorrow, or excuse me, Friday, when I send out the email that says these are the ones approved with the wording that's there. I can copy you guys and gals, and that way you'll see what's going on. And that way, if you don't feel like if we're still being too nice, Mr. Jordan, we'll rough it up a bit.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Tack.
Okay.
Okay, we have an insurance meeting August 27th, so we'll be reporting back to the board after that. I again talked to Mr. Hodge and Mr. Holliday regarding TLN update and FRN. There'll be something hopefully next month. Number 16, I think that's for you, Mr. Holliday.
In our June 4th board meeting, we had a parent come and address the board, and he related to us some concerns that he had about readings from the Quran in the 7th grade social studies TCAP test. Most of you probably will recall his comments and how we left that. After I heard those comments and thought about it a little bit, I picked up the phone and I called one of our representatives and shared with them what had occurred, and just wanted them to be aware and wanted them to have knowledge of that circumstance. Lo and behold, not too long after that, I ended up with an invitation to what is called the House Education Committee's Summer Review. And so the House, for the state legislature, has divided Education Committee into two bodies, and both of those bodies come together for this 2-day review of some issues. It's not a mandatory meeting, and so I don't expect that there'll be 100% attendance, but there are 2 board members, Ms. Patty Bounds from Knox County Schools and Aaron Holliday from Rutherford County Schools, that will give testimony there tomorrow. It is at 1 o'clock. I think the room has been changed. I've gotten a late email this afternoon, but I have not looked at that yet. But it'll be up at the State House. It'll also continue on August 13th. The agenda is part of our board agenda tonight, and I want to start by saying that after a lot of consideration and a little bit of discussion, I will not go there as a representative of Rutherford County School Board. I would not hazard to speak on behalf of any fellow board members, not the least of which is because this is a little bit of an unscripted circumstance. I'll give a bit of a statement, and then it's kind of a question-answer. If the House members have questions of me, I'll be faced to answer those, and the comments that I make may or may not completely align with the way my fellow board members feel. At the same time, without question, I stand on your shoulders and the shoulders of our system, and will seek in every way to bring honor to our system in what I share. But so that I appropriately reflect things, I wanted to open for any of the board members to share your thoughts and then also share a few of mine. I'll run down through the topics that we'll be talking about. The Review of Assessment Task Force convened by the Department of Education. So Candace McQueen convened a task force that would look at assessments in the state of Tennessee. And a fellow board member, TSBA incoming president Debbie Shedden, was on that task force. I spoke with her via email today. She said it was very productive, and she looks forward to that report. One of the things that we know from that is that Measurement Incorporated will be the vendor that will produce what we know as TCAP, what will be known as 10 Ready. That's right. Okay, yeah, as 10 Ready. So we know about that. I have in my remarks that Rutherford County has experience with Measurement Incorporated. We have found them to be a good partner and generally reliable in those assessment tools. The value of the quality assessments. The third thing here is testing transparency. Now, that relates to a pending piece of legislation, House Bill 1089. In essence, it says that a student's parent or a student's teacher to view a state-required standardized summative assessment taken by the student or the student's answers subject to certain conditions. Right now, current security for TCAP is you can't look at the test once it's over with. Teachers don't look at the test. Only the student looks at the test, only the student knows what's on the test, and that's the only review of that test. This bill would make certain conditions available where you could go back and look at that test. Parent, student, teacher could go back and look at that test. One of the models for that is the ACT test. And so each year the ACT is given, and then after a certain period of time, scoring and such, the ACT is released. And then a lot of folks use that to prepare and different things of that nature, and that's the standard practice. Well, there are those who say, well, why can't we do that in TCAP? Well, one of the reasons that I have learned through preparing for this is that it would increase the expense of that vendor's preparing that test by orders of magnitude, 3, 4, 5 times greater expense. This bill has been scored by the Office of Fiscal Responsibility or whatever, but the fiscal scoring on it at $1.4 million per annual. And so for that reason, with that type of expense related to it, it doesn't have very good prospects of making it through. I guess the best way to say that is even though you look at a test question and you think to yourself, well, that's just a test question. How hard was it to write that test question? Those who are preparing that test question say that there have been sometimes as many as 28 highly paid professionals who have put eyes and hours into that test question, and that test question is actually incredibly valuable, and its security is worth that much. So that's something to consider there. Understanding quick score, cut scores. Big issue there is not in 2016, because we're not going to get any of those. We've already been told that. Opt-out provisions. Okay, if we can't have testing transparency, we can't have this kind of open access to be able to review what is on the test. Personally, I feel like the alternative is we need to allow an opt-out provision. Now, that flies in the face of the very stringent work that we do here at the Board of Education. We need that test information. We need those results, and we need it from all of our students. There's a reason to not have opt-out. But if the general public is going to be told you can never see the test, it may be that there's a compromise there. So I'm interested, Mr. Odom.
There's a federal thing that we have to test at least 95% of the students, or you're considered you don't meet the test. You're automatically fail. So the issue is 95% of each subgroup, 95% of whatever you're testing. Participation rate has to be 95% or higher, and that's a federal requirement. Probably the federal requirement's the one that drives that one more than anything local.
Yeah, yeah. Other thoughts? I go back to the situation that came to our boardroom where we had a parent say, somehow you failed, Department of Education. You failed and you apologized. The end result was that the Executive Director of Assessment for the Department of Education apologized to our Rutherford County parent because indeed his student did read from the Quran in standardized testing. Once you failed, and you don't have a solution that allows me to be able to go back and review, then it almost seems like you've pinned yourself to a circumstance. You're going to have to allow the possibility of opt-out. That's something that they're going to have to debate. Competency-based testing, this is partial credit and the manner of the test. Do we really understand it, and how do we get to that place of understanding the material? K through 2 assessments. I don't know what they've got in mind for kindergarten through second grade assessments.
The secondary test is a very good test for us because it allows us to have that magnetic for third grade, and there's that accountability and other information we have there as well. If we didn't give that test, we would not have that.
Okay.
They're working toward it. I gave Mr. Odom some paperwork the other day where they're doing, like you said, they're releasing for bid a K-2 assessment as well. And I think they're trying to meet that accountability for teachers because you have that whole population of teachers that only have skin in the game to the point that they're developing those students for those second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth grade assessments.
Excellent. End of course assessment and dual enrollment courses and advanced placement, AP courses. My personal perspective there is a word of caution as the AP curriculum continues to be driven by the College Board's organization, a preference toward dual enrollment because we do have a community partner, be it MTSU or Motlow, that reflects the values and local control even at an advanced level of college curriculum. And so that's my personal perspective on that, and so that's a thought. But we have an incredible AP program at Siegel High School that we certainly don't want to undermine. So we have to.
We also have the same similar type program at Central as well as other high schools. Central are not the only ones with AP programs, but I agree with you. The dual credit, dual enrollment, it guarantees that college credit where AP, you have to make a certain score.
You know the difference between the dual credit and the dual enrollment that may be discussed.
Don't mind you going over it.
Dual enrollment would be that they're enrolled in Rutherford County schools and in a higher education institution also. That's more expensive because you typically have to pay MTSU's enrollment fee, although Dr. McPhee is waiving some of that this next year, some of the things that he did. Dual credits are basically taught by our high school teachers using college curriculum or something, but the credit would be accepted by the university. You're not a student in dual credit, you're not a student of that higher education institution, but they will accept that credit. So there's two separation there, dual credit, dual enrollments, two different things.
Tremendous number of dual credit classes given through the CTE program.
Okay. Only three more, guys. Hang with me here. Digital access and security. That's kind of self-explanatory. Virtual schools, we've been over these before, that we feel strongly, and I'll express it as I feel strongly, must comply with assessment standards. We can't give a pass to a virtual academy out there that they don't have to meet the same standard that we do in the classroom. They certainly absolutely have to do that. And then technology access and preparedness, that's an opportunity to strike at the state legislature for funding. If they want us to have technology access, then we're going to need technology funding. So there's that. The last thing before I step away from any of this, it certainly is the catalyst that my participation here relates to the concern that came up to our boardroom. And that concern comes back to, do we have a similar thing that we saw in textbooks? Do we not only have compliance with the state standard, but also factual accuracy and an unbiased perspective? Some of us very close raised that issue very effectively, and changes were made to the textbook adoption process. That's a strong indication for the taxpayers and voters that the legislature and the Department of Education can improve. We're on the right track, but we've got to make sure, number one, the assessments have got to align with the standards, and number two, they have got to be factually based and unbiased. And if they're not, then the consequences are extreme. And the consequences may indeed be opt-out provisions that put us in jeopardy of a 95% participation rate at the federal level. If the test is a worthy tool, then our system will support it. Our parents will hear from us that we should be participants in it, and we'll move forward. But if the testing instrument is flawed, in fact, not just flawed, but perhaps harmful to the values that we hold in our communities, that's not going to work.
We wish you well and good luck in your appearance with them. You're in their playing field there, so good luck to you.
Indeed.
General discussion, anybody have anything?
Several of you received an email dealing with unpaid meal charges, and I did ask Mr. Sandvig to prepare something for you. If you'd like, you received an email about charges under the federal. If you'd like to hear him on that, we've got that information.
We'll give everybody a chance to look this over. If they have questions on Thursday night, we'll take it up then.
I provide you two additional documents. One is the no-shows as of today, August 11th. We have 874 no-shows. It's not unusual for a district our size and that sort of thing. You have students that have moved, we haven't received a record request for them yet. You know, we don't know where they might be at this point, or some of them are still coming in and registering. As you see, the numbers change daily. So why can't we be really firm about our numbers? It's just these things like this right here that so you can do that. The other thing that you have is I did ask Mr. Solomon to give you monthly updates with the computers because we had the special appropriations, you remember last spring. And also he sent me an update. We have 47 computer labs that have been installed. The teacher computers placed there 41 and 1,353 student computers, 2 sets of laptops in there. Had to replace a number of teacher computers because they wouldn't run the test either. You know, some of the same issues that we had with the others. So there's been 530 of those replaced. So you can kind of add the numbers up and see that they've been very busy since in June and July to get to this point. And they've had another large number shipped. So we'll do another report 1st September.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Todd. Anybody else?
Everybody at Walter Hill showed up, everybody at McFadden showed up, and everybody at Stewart's Creek Middle showed up. Other than that, we're missing some folks, aren't we?
They'll start calling, schools will start, well, they're already trying, but the elementary schools usually much more quickly, they don't have as many students, but they'll start calling moms, dads, grandmothers, anything that's on their database that said was a contact, has so-and-so moved, can you give us information? And it works out fairly quickly, but that's what your administrators are dealing with right now.
All righty. All right, we'll be back together. Mr. Estes, did you have something?
Have we got our 10 ready standards yet?
The process that the legislature passed last time, the standards that are in place were the Tennessee standards that they had. This year's test will be basically aligned to what those standards have been. They have to report back to Amy Gullion is actually one of those that'll be here Thursday night. She is on that review committee appointed by the governor. He appoints some Speaker of House, Speakers the Senate, appointed people. They will review it. You've also got the part that's been done is the public. There was a big public comment that was collected, and the people that Southern Regional Educational Board, the high schools at work people, collected that. They didn't review them, but then they have forwarded public comments and all to these committees that will look at it. And then ultimately, it's going to be 2 years, right? They're telling us 2 years before it's in place. The state board will ultimately have to approve it. They didn't change that in the law, but after the legislative committees and the other committees approve, it'll then finally go to the state board, and then it would be incorporated in the testing. The contract with Measurement Inc. says whatever Tennessee standards are, you will have to adjust your tests to match it. So that's should be out there a couple of years out.
The Department of Education has made great strides in that transparency characteristic. Their website is much more user-friendly these days, and getting to those assessments to be able to take a look at what am I supposed to know in this grade, in this subject matter, is much more user-friendly. And in addition to that, there are the assessments, and then there are the standards. And then there's this thing they call the blueprint for assessment. And the blueprint for assessment, as I looked at it, it's kind of like a syllabus. You know, if you got a syllabus and they said, that's what's going to be on the test, that's kind of what that blueprint for assessment is. And I thought, you know, if I've got this standard and this blueprint for assessment, man, I can pretty well dial in as to exactly what's going to be on that 10 ready test at the end of the year. It really is starting to become a pretty transparent thing. Are there some things on there that I still would like to see changed? Yeah, there are. But I can see them very clearly, very clearly.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we'll be back again Thursday evening. We stand adjourned.